On June 4, 1960, 4 teenagers went camping by a peaceful Finnish lake. The group decided to pitch their tent just a few meters from the shore, under a clear summer sky. But by morning, 3 of them were found brutally murdered, stabbed, and beaten to death in cold blood. Only 1 teen survived the horror of that night, becoming the key witness in the investigation. But it soon became clear that the truth was far more sinister than first believed. Even after decades of investigation, one question remains: what really happened at Bodom Lake? Hello, and here's the truth behind the shallow grave at Bodom Lake. Just before midnight on June 4, 1960, Mila Irmeli Björklund, 15, and her friend Anja Tulikimäki, also 15, told their boyfriends, Seppo Antero Boismans and Niels Wilhelm Gustafsson, that they needed to go to the bathroom. At some point during the night, the girls left the tent and traveled approximately 500 meters along the lakeshore to a wooded area where they relieved themselves. No one knows exactly when they returned to the tent, but it must have been sometime between midnight and 5 a.m. when an intruder broke into the tent and attacked the sleeping couple. Seppo and Niels awoke to the sight of a stranger standing over their tent with a knife. Startled, Seppo screamed and tried to grab the attacker, but the intruder slashed him across the face, causing him to stumble back and fall to the ground. Meanwhile, the girls screamed for help and tried to flee. According to the official police report, written down by Niels himself, the attacker lunged forward and struck Seppo in the neck with such force that the knife broke off inside his throat. Terrified, Niels claims he pretended to be dead. Although seriously wounded, Niels could still hear the girls screaming. The attacker appeared to be going after them now, although we don't know what exactly happened in those crucial minutes. Police presume that the man simply found the girls easier targets than him. At some point, the attacker disappeared. Niels waited until sunrise and, seeing the man had gone, crawled out of the tent to find help. When the police finally arrived at the campsite, the scene was both grisly and confusing. The tent was ripped open and covered in blood, as was the ground around it. Blood formed a pool beneath the head of the tent, and outside it, they found the body of Mela lying on her back, naked except for 1 shoe. The other 3 victims were found inside the tent. Seppo was slumped against the wall of the tent with the upper part of his body outside. His throat was slit and his heart had already stopped beating. Next to him, Anja was curled up in a fetal position. She was kneeling as if she had been praying. Her body was mutilated, her thighs wide apart, her ankles tied together. Also inside the tent was the battered body of Niels. He had a deep cut on his face, a fractured skull, broken ribs, a broken collarbone, several stab wounds, and multiple cuts all over his body. His jeans and underwear were torn. He was lying next to the tent wall and seemed to have crawled there after the attack. Between him and the wall was a knife. Medics rushed Niels to the hospital, where he fell into a coma for 2 weeks. The doctors operated to remove a blood clot from his brain and save his life. When he woke up, he was bandaged and confused. Doctors questioned him about the attack, but he couldn't remember anything except waking up and seeing a strange man holding a knife. Niels would later claim that he had no recollection of what had happened due to the head wound, but the police felt he was hiding something. In the days following the massacre, over 300 people volunteered to come forward with tips for the police, but none of these led to any solid leads. In fact, the entire crime scene had been contaminated by outsiders who walked through the woods and tent site. Forensic specialists who arrived at the scene later could not collect any trace evidence due to this. Of course, this wasn't because the killer had wiped clean the scene himself, but because so many people visited the area after the crimes. This left the police high and dry without any evidence to go on. None of the teenagers had enemies that would want to hurt them. None of them had been robbed, and the tent had not been ransacked. All of their belongings remained in place. It was unclear if the incident was connected to a recent series of break-ins in the area, which had led some residents to believe that the murders were committed by members of the Communist Workers' Party. However, this theory was quickly dismissed. No one witnessed the attack and no motive could be established. The case went cold after just a few months. But this wasn't the end of the story. In late 2004, however, the case would suddenly become topical once more. The only surviving victim, now named Niels Bam, since he had changed his last name, was summoned to testify in another pending homicide investigation. But police also used the opportunity to re-interview him about the Bodom Lake killings. The interview took a strange turn when Niels was asked why he had been unable to identify the perpetrator during the initial investigation. He responded, "Because I didn't see his face." The officer pressed him, asking why he hadn't mentioned this before. BHM claimed he had mentioned it, but it was never written down. The officer replied, "Well, now let's get it straight. We're writing it down now." He continued, "I'm asking you this once and once only. Did you kill Seppo, Mela, and Anya?" "No," replied Bem. The officer continued, "If you killed Seppo, it was you alone who did it, right? You didn't do it together with someone else?" "No," said Bem. After this conversation, the police conducted a second polygraph test on Beam. It failed to reveal anything new. But in January 2005, after 45 years, he was arrested and charged with the murder of his two friends. He was also charged with attempted murder for the attack on his girlfriend, Anne. In addition to the witness testimony, the police were able to use forensic technology that had not existed at the time of the crime. Bloodstains found on BHM's shoes were re-examined and found to contain DNA from Seppo and Mela. DNA profiling was a fairly new science at the time, and according to criminalist Markku Moilanen, the result was so clear it was impossible to doubt that the blood belonged to the victims. Furthermore, DNA analysis revealed that the bloodstains were located on the same pair of boots BHM had been wearing when he was questioned by the police shortly after the murders. After hearing the news, Bum's daughter came to his defense, insisting that her father was innocent and accusing the police of planting the evidence. Many people agreed with her, believing her father had been wrongfully accused. However, it seemed like prosecutors had a good case against Bem, and many were surprised when the judge acquitted him of all charges. Prosecutors had failed to prove Bem's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. In fact, his defense attorney argued successfully that Bem may have been at the scene of the crime, but he had not committed the murders. The verdict was appealed, and Bem was released pending the outcome of the appeal. However, after reviewing the case, the appellate court ruled in favor of Bem, stating that the prosecution had failed to prove Bem's guilt. Bem was officially declared innocent in April 2006. Since then, he has sued the Finnish state for wrongful imprisonment and defamation, arguing that police pressured him into confessing. In May 2007, the Helsinki District Court ordered the state to pay Bem over €50,000 in compensation. However, the state's appeal of the decision reduced the compensation to €20,000. With that, the bizarre case ended. As of today, the case remains unsolved. One theory is that Bem killed his friends in a fit of rage after drinking too much, and then made up the story about a stranger to avoid going to prison. However, this theory is contradicted by the medical evidence, which showed that he suffered severe injuries, indicating that he was indeed attacked. Which begs the question, what do you think happened at Bodom Lake? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching.